The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty ranch as Sarah stepped down from her father's old pickup truck, and her heart felt heavy with memories of this place where she had grown up so many years ago, and the weathered barn still stood at the edge of the property just as it always had, and the fences needed mending just like they did when she was a girl running barefoot through these fields. She had come back to help settle her late aunt's estate, and the ranch had been left to a distant cousin named Thomas who had agreed to meet her here today to discuss what would become of the land and the animals. And Sarah wasn't sure what to expect from this man she had never met, but who shared her family's blood. As she walked toward the barn, she noticed a figure kneeling beside one of the horses in the corral, and the horse seemed agitated and was favoring its front left leg, and the man was speaking softly to the animal with a patience that reminded Sarah of her grandfather, and she found herself moving closer to see what was happening. Thomas looked up as she approached, and his face was lined with the kind of weathering that comes from years of honest work under the sun, and his eyes were kind, despite the worry she could see there, and he nodded a greeting before turning his attention back to the horse. "The mare is in pain," he said quietly, "and I've been trying to figure out what's wrong, but she won't let me get close enough to examine her properly, and she's been like this since yesterday, and I'm worried it might be something serious." Sarah had grown up around horses, and she remembered her grandfather teaching her how to approach a frightened animal with calm and gentleness, and she climbed over the fence slowly and walked toward the mare with her hands visible and her voice low and soothing. The horse's ears flicked back and forth as Sarah approached, and she could see the tension in the animal's body and the fear in her eyes. And Sarah began humming an old tune her grandfather used to sing, and the horse's ears turned toward her, and some of the tension seemed to ease from her muscles. She reached out slowly and let the horse smell her hand, and then she began stroking the mare's neck with long, gentle movements, and Thomas watched in silence as the horse gradually relaxed under Sarah's touch. And after several minutes, Sarah knelt down beside the injured leg. "Rub it gently," she directed, and Thomas came closer and knelt beside her, and she guided his hand to a spot just above the horse's knee. "And press here, but with a light touch, like you're trying to feel what's beneath the surface and not just what you can see." The rancher gasped as his fingers found a swollen area that hadn't been visible to the eye, and then he found the hidden pain that had been causing the mare such distress, and there was a deep bruise and possibly a strained tendon that would need careful treatment and rest. Sarah showed him how to wrap the leg properly, and they worked together in a comfortable silence that felt somehow familiar, despite them being strangers. And the horse stood patiently as they tended to her injury, and Sarah could feel the animal's gratitude in the way she leaned slightly into her touch. When they finished, Thomas stood and brushed the dust from his knees and looked at Sarah with genuine appreciation. "And thank you," he said, "and I've been trying to help her all day, but I couldn't reach her the way you did, and there's something about the way you moved that reminded me of the stories I heard about your grandfather." They walked together toward the old farmhouse, and Sarah felt a wave of nostalgia wash over her as she climbed the familiar porch steps and remembered countless summer evenings spent here with her aunt, drinking lemonade and talking about life and love, and all the dreams that seemed so big when you were young. Inside, Thomas made coffee, and they sat at the kitchen table that Sarah remembered from her childhood, and the wood was scarred and worn, but it had been polished with care, and there were fresh flowers in a jar by the window. And Sarah realized that Thomas had been taking care of this place with genuine love. He told her about his own childhood on a small farm 2 states away, and how he had always dreamed of having land like this where he could raise horses and live a simpler life. And when he learned about the inheritance, it seemed like a gift from heaven, but now he wasn't sure if he could manage it alone, and he worried about doing right by the animals and the land. Sarah listened, and she heard in his words the same kind of loneliness she had been carrying since her divorce 3 years ago, and the same uncertainty about whether starting over was possible at this stage of life. And she found herself sharing things she hadn't talked about in years, and Thomas listened with the same patience he had shown the horse. As the afternoon turned to evening, they walked the property together, and Sarah showed him the places that held special memories, and the old oak tree where she carved her initials when she was 12, and the creek where she used to catch frogs with her cousins, and the hill where her grandfather taught her to whistle. Thomas shared his own vision for the ranch and how he wanted to create a place where retired horses could live out their years in peace, and maybe offer riding lessons to children who might not otherwise have the chance to connect with animals, and Sarah felt something stir in her heart as she listened and realized that his dreams aligned with values her own family had held dear. Over the following weeks, Sarah found reasons to return to the ranch and help Thomas with various projects, and they repaired fences together and mucked out stalls and sat on the porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. And somewhere in those quiet moments, a friendship began to grow into something deeper. One evening, as they were checking on the mare whose leg had healed beautifully, Thomas said something that Sarah would remember for the rest of her life, and he said that sometimes the hidden pain we carry inside is like that horse's injury, and we can't always see it on the surface, but it affects everything we do and how we move through the world. He talked about his own losses and the wife who had left him years ago and the children who had grown distant, and the way he had buried himself in work to avoid feeling the emptiness. And Sarah recognized herself in his words, and she realized they were both people who had been living with hidden pain for far too long. Sarah reached out and took his hand, and she said that maybe healing begins when we let someone care enough to look beneath the surface and find where we're really hurting. And Thomas squeezed her hand gently, and in that simple gesture, Sarah felt a tenderness she thought she might never experience again. As autumn arrived and painted the ranch in shades of gold and crimson, Sarah made a decision that surprised even herself, and she sold her apartment in the city and moved permanently to the ranch. And Thomas welcomed her not just as a partner in running the property, but as someone he wanted to build a life with. They took things slowly because they both understood that some things can't be rushed, and healing takes time and patience, and they learned each other's rhythms and quirks and made space for each other's quiet moments and loud laughter and all the messy, beautiful reality of two people choosing to be vulnerable with each other. The ranch became what Thomas had envisioned and more, and retired horses arrived from various rescue organizations, and children came on weekends to learn about caring for animals and responsibility and kindness. And Sarah and Thomas taught them not just about horses, but about seeing beneath the surface and recognizing when something or someone needs gentle care. Sarah's grown children visited and were surprised to see their mother so content, and they had worried about her being alone. But now they saw her laugh freely and move with purpose, and they realized that sometimes life offers second chances when we least expect them, and that it's never too late to start over. One winter evening, as they sat by the fireplace with the wind howling outside, Thomas said that he was grateful for the day Sarah arrived, and that he had been struggling alone for so long and didn't realize how much he needed someone to share the burden and the joy. And Sarah told him that she felt the same, and that this ranch had given her back a part of herself she thought was lost forever. They talked about getting older and how it wasn't what either of them had expected when they were young and dreaming big dreams, and there were aches and limitations and moments of frustration. But there was also a kind of peace that comes from accepting yourself and knowing what truly matters. Sarah thought about that first day when she showed Thomas how to find the mare's hidden injury, and she realized that in teaching him to look deeper and touch gently, she had been preparing them both for something much more profound. And sometimes the smallest acts of kindness open doors we didn't even know were there. The years that followed were not without challenges, because life never is, and there were veterinary emergencies and financial pressures and the inevitable health concerns that come with aging. But Sarah and Thomas faced everything together with the same patience and gentleness they showed the animals in their care. They celebrated small victories, like watching a traumatized horse learn to trust again, and teaching a shy child to ride with confidence, and planting a garden that actually produced vegetables. And these moments felt more precious than any of the grand achievements they had chased in their younger years. Sarah's aunt would have been pleased to see what the ranch had become and how it served as a place of healing, not just for animals but for people who needed to reconnect with something real and simple and true. And sometimes Sarah felt her aunt's presence